They said the island was insignificant. They said it was just another dot on the map of the Pacific, not worth the blood it would demand. But in 1944, American Marines proved that no place is insignificant when freedom is at stake. On the scorched coral of Peleliu, against an enemy that refused to surrender and a landscape that seemed designed to kill, the United States showed the world what resolve truly looks like. This was not just a battle for an island. This was a declaration that America would not be stopped. Far across the western Pacific Ocean, east of the Philippines, lies the Peleliu Archipelago, a chain of islands surrounded by reefs sharp enough to tear steel and flesh alike. Over the years, Peleliu passed quietly from Spain to Germany, then to Imperial Japan, becoming another stepping stone in Japan's expanding empire. By the time World War II reached these waters, Peleliu had been transformed into a fortress. Beneath its coral ridges and jungle-covered hills, Japanese forces carved hundreds of caves and tunnels, building a defensive system meant to absorb punishment, hide from bombardment, and destroy the attacker piece by piece. American planners believed the operation would be quick. Peleliu was small, barely 6.5 square miles. The expectation was a few days of fighting, then victory. What followed instead was one of the most brutal and controversial battles of the Pacific War. Operation Stalemate 2 began with days of relentless naval gunfire and aerial bombing, hammering the island in preparation for the assault. From the sea, it appeared that nothing could have survived, but the enemy was not on the surface. They were underground, waiting. On the morning of September 15, 1944, at exactly 0830 hours, the 1st Marine Division began its landing. Amphibious tractors crossed the reef and moved toward beaches codenamed White and Orange. As the ramps dropped, Japanese machine guns opened fire. Coral exploded into the air, turning into deadly shrapnel. Men fell before they reached the sand. Others pressed forward, driven by training, duty, and loyalty to the men beside them. Peleliu was unlike anything the Marines had faced before. The heat was crushing, often exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun burned skin raw. Water was scarce, sometimes undrinkable. Shade was almost non-existent after the bombardment stripped the island bare. Sharp coral shredded boots and feet, while artillery strikes sent fragments flying through the air. Every step forward felt like a gamble with death. Marine Joe W. Clapper would later say that landing on Peleliu felt like trying to run between raindrops. On that first day, his life was saved by a Marine who should never have been there, a 15-year-old boy who had slipped through the system and found himself in the first assault wave. When a Japanese soldier appeared at point-blank range, the teenager fired first, saving Joe's life. The next day, Joe watched his closest friend die violently in front of him. Not long after, Joe himself was shot in the chest. As he was evacuated, he passed beaches so covered with fallen Marines that he said they looked carpeted with the dead. Rising above the landing zones were the Ummerbrogel Mountains, a maze of razor-sharp ridges, narrow valleys, caves, and sinkholes. The rock was too hard to dig foxholes. There was nowhere to hide. Japanese soldiers moved unseen through tunnels, appearing suddenly to fire and disappearing back into the earth. This area soon earned a name that said everything the Marines needed to know: Bloody Nose Ridge. Assault after assault was launched against it, each one costing lives for only yards of ground.
Navy corpsman John W. Bailey called Peleliu the horror of all battles. He treated wounded Marines under constant fire, fought dehydration and infection, and struggled against the heat that blistered skin and swelled eyes shut. When not tending the living, he worked with graves registration, searching for bodies and identifying the dead so families back home would know what happened to their sons. In that climate, bodies decomposed rapidly. Sometimes it took days before the dead could be recovered. The smell of death hung so heavily over the island that pilots later said they could smell Peleliu from the air. As the battle raged on, other Americans paid the price as well. The Navy's underwater deletion teams had risked their lives before the landings, swimming in broad daylight to clear mines and blast paths through the reef under enemy fire. Days later, the Seabees arrived, builders who fought as they worked. Under sniper fire, they repaired airstrips, roads, and shattered buildings so operations could continue. One Seabee, William Taylor Stitt, narrowly survived when a sniper's bullet struck the clock on his vehicle instead of his body. Even those tasked with building rather than fighting were never truly safe on Peleliu. Slowly, painfully, the Americans pushed forward. Within the first week, the airfield was captured, allowing Marine Corsair fighters to fly close air support missions so near to the front lines that sorties could be completed in less than 30 minutes. Still, the fighting dragged on. The Japanese defense did not collapse. It resisted to the last man, fighting from caves until sealed inside by explosives, fire, and flamethrowers. Day after day turned into weeks. The cost mounted. Nearly 1,800 Americans were killed. More than 8,000 were wounded or missing. Over 10,000 Japanese soldiers died, almost none surrendering. When Peleliu was finally declared secure after 74 days of combat, it was clear that this small island had demanded an enormous price. The men who survived Peleliu were never the same. One Marine later wrote that if a veteran of Peleliu reached heaven, he would salute at the gate and say, "I have already served my time in hell." 8 Marines earned the Medal of Honor on that island, but thousands more carried scars, memories, and wounds that no medal could ever honor. Today, Peleliu is quiet again. The jungle has reclaimed the hills, the guns are silent, but beneath the coral and soil lies a story of sacrifice that helped secure victory in the Pacific. This was not just a battle. This was American resolve, written in fire, paid for in blood, and remembered forever.